Summer is supposed to be a season of warmth, laughter, and memories you carry for a lifetime. Barbecues, camping trips, long drives with the windows down, and nights by the fire with friends. But for some people, those summer memories turned into something far darker. Memories that never faded, that still echo every time the air turns hot and the sun lingers too long in the sky. Tonight, we're diving into 3 terrifying true summer horror stories that will make you rethink everything you thought was safe about the season. So grab a drink, dim the lights, and get ready. Because these stories are the kind that take ordinary summer nights and twist them into nightmares you'll never forget. Story 1. The Lake George Cabin Intruder. Lake George, New York, is usually a postcard of summer fun. Families rent cabins, kids splash in the water, couples sit on porches watching the sun dip behind the mountains. For Mark and his wife Allison, it was supposed to be a peaceful getaway before their first child was born. They rented a small cabin tucked against the tree line. It wasn't fancy, but it had a screened porch, a wood stove, and just enough privacy to feel like their own little escape. On their second night there, while Allison was making dinner, Mark noticed a man walking along the tree line. The man looked like any other local sunburned skin, faded baseball cap, and a scruffy beard. He gave a wave, and Mark, being polite, waved back. Minutes later, there was a knock at the door. The stranger introduced himself as Tom, claiming to own the cabin across the lake. He was friendly enough, asking where they were from and how long they were staying. But something about the way his eyes moved, lingering on their cooler, the lock on the door, even Allison's pregnant belly put Mark on edge. Tom left after a few minutes, saying, "Enjoy the lake. It's real quiet around here." That night, Mark couldn't sleep. The woods felt alive with noises, branches snapping, twigs breaking. Around 1 a.m., Allison shook him awake. "Mark, someone's on the porch." Through the thin curtains, they saw a shadow move across the boards. The screen door creaked. A hand jiggled the knob. Mark grabbed the heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove and whispered for Allison to call 911. But her phone had no service. Neither did his. The knob rattled harder, then stopped. Silence pressed in. For 5 long minutes, nothing. Then faintly, they heard footsteps circling the cabin, crunching through the gravel. Mark forced himself to stay awake until sunrise. When light finally spilled across the porch, he stepped outside. The boards were wet with dew, except for one patch where muddy boot prints marked the steps. Later that afternoon, as they packed to leave, Mark spotted something tucked under a rock near the porch. It was a knife, its blade scratched and rusted, but sharp enough to gleam in the sun. The local ranger they reported it to frowned when they described Tom. No one by that name owned a cabin on the lake. And in fact, the property across from them had been abandoned for nearly 10 years. Mark and Allison left early, abandoning the last 2 days of their trip. Years later, whenever Allison tells the story, she ends it the same way. "If Mark hadn't stayed awake, I don't think we'd be here today." Story 2. The Bonfire Trap college summers are supposed to be carefree. For Sarah and Megan, roommates in their sophomore year, that meant road trips, lakeside parties, and late nights under the stars. One July weekend, they drove out to a small lakeside town in Michigan, staying in a cheap motel near the water. On their second night, they were wandering the boardwalk when a group of local guys invited them to a bonfire out in the woods. "It's the thing everyone does around here," one of them said with a grin. Sarah hesitated, but Megan, always the adventurous one, convinced her. "It'll be fun. Just one drink, then we go." They followed the guy's beat-up pickup truck down a winding dirt road. The deeper they drove, the darker it got. No streetlights, no houses, just thick trees pressing in. Finally, the truck pulled into a clearing. A fire was already burning, but no one else was there. Sarah whispered, "I thought you said everyone hangs out here?" One of the men shrugged. "They'll show up later." His smile didn't reach his eyes. The girls stayed close together, sipping cheap beer and forcing small talk. The men kept pressing, "Why don't you relax? You don't trust us?" But something about their tone was wrong. When Sarah pulled out her phone to check the time, she noticed she had no signal. One of the men noticed too. He leaned close and said softly, "Don't worry. Out here, no one can bother you." Panic prickled her skin. She tugged Megan's arm. "Bathroom," she whispered. They excused themselves, heading toward the trees. Once out of sight, Sarah hissed, "We need to get out of here." Megan nodded, eyes wide. They crept through the woods, trying to circle back to the road without being noticed. But behind them, branches snapped. Male voices called out, "Where you girls going?" They ran. Branches whipped their faces. Roots snagged their shoes. Finally, they burst onto the dirt road. Ahead, headlights appeared, a minivan rolling slowly toward them. Sarah waved frantically, tears streaming down her face. The driver, a middle-aged woman with kids in the back, slowed. They tumbled inside, gasping, "Please, just drive." Behind them, the men emerged from the woods, faces twisted with rage. But the minivan sped away, leaving them in the dust. Later, the sheriff explained that similar reports had come in before. Locals lured visitors out with promises of bonfires, then tried to corner them. "You were lucky," he said grimly. For Sarah and Megan, summer would never feel carefree again. Story 3. The Bear Encounter. Camping with your dad is supposed to be a rite of passage, a bonding experience you never forget. For 12-year-old Kyle, that summer trip to the Smoky Mountains was supposed to be exactly that. He and his father set up camp near a creek, roasting hot dogs and watching fireflies blink in the trees. Kyle fell asleep to the sound of rushing water, wrapped safe in his sleeping bag. But at 2 a.m., he woke to a noise. Heavy. Rhythmic. Like breathing. At first, he thought it was his father snoring. But then came the crunch of leaves, the snap of a branch. Something massive was outside the tent. His father stirred, pressing a finger to his lips. "Don't move," he whispered. Through the thin nylon, a shadow loomed. Broad shoulders, long snout, dark fur glinting in the moonlight. A black bear. It sniffed the tent, huffing, circling. Kyle's heart pounded so loud he was sure the animal could hear it. The bear's claws scraped against the fabric, testing, pressing. Then it found the cooler. With one swipe, it sent it tumbling. Plastic cracked, food spilled. The bear growled low, tearing into the scraps. His father leaned close. "When I say run, you run to the car. Don't look back." Kyle shook his head, tears brimming. But when the bear turned, distracted by the food, his father unzipped the tent in one slow, deliberate motion. "Now," he hissed. They bolted. Bare feet pounded dirt, breath ragged. Behind them, the bear roared, the ground shaking with its weight. The car was 30 yards away. 20. 10. His father yanked the door open, shoved Kyle inside, and slammed it shut just as the bear charged. The beast rammed the side of the car, rocking it violently. Claws screeched against metal. Kyle screamed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the bear huffed and lumbered back into the trees, dragging the cooler with it. They sat in silence, the night air heavy with fear. In the morning, they returned to the site. The tent was shredded. Footprints the size of plates circled the camp. To this day, Kyle swears he can still hear the sound of the bear's breathing in his nightmares. Summer is supposed to bring joy vacations, bonfires, adventures under the stars. But as these stories prove, it can also bring danger. Sometimes from people, sometimes from nature, and sometimes from something we can't explain. If tonight's stories made you think twice about your own summer memories, Hit like to let me know. Share your own unsettling encounters in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And if you crave more chilling true horror stories, don't forget to subscribe to the Rewind Vault for weekly tales that remind us how close danger really is. Because summer might end, but some memories haunt you forever.